For some of you in the audience, I've actually had the pleasure of working with you in the past, but for those who don't know, I've been involved, I think this is my 20th anniversary in the industry. As we'll talk about, it wasn't always called learning innovation or e-learning, but 20 years of working with different technologies and seeing how they apply for learning. And that's a key, really, theme for us in driving the centre is each new technological wave, what the shift in learning is the potential shift in learning is from each of those waves. And that's really what the centre is all about, looking for this new phrase of next practice. And again, we had a previous session where we used a great phrase from Michelangelo, which is always learning. I don't know if you've heard this before, but apparently Michelangelo quoted this when he was 80 something. So for me, if somebody as learned as Michelangelo is still learning at 80, we've still got an awfully long way to go. And I learned this new phrase, next practice, so I'm not going to claim this phrase. Grode used it earlier. I thought it was a typo. So I was proofing something about a week ago, and I said, I presume we mean either best practice or next generation, and which is it? And then yesterday, I saw the final press release, and I said, the typo is still there. So it was explained to me that actually next generation, which is probably what I would have said, is old school now. And the key new phrase is next practice, right? So best practice is what we do today, and we benchmark ourselves against best practice. And we think that's fantastic. But what the centre is all about is not about what is the best practice today. It's about trying to see into the future. And what does that future look like? And what is next practice going to be? So that's why I have this morning changed the title of my presentation to In Search of Next Practice. So there's three key themes that we're going to talk about this morning in terms of why we think the Centre for Learning Innovation has a chance to predict what that next best practice is. And the first thing is to learn from the past. And people have mentioned this already this morning, but through each of the last 3 or 4 decades, there has been a major shift in technology that started in the 1980s when for the first time we had personal computers on the desk. And you remember the black screens, or some of us will remember black screens with green text, but these were massive revolutions in the time in technology. Then came multimedia and this huge shift again in technology. After that, we had e-learning and everything was going online. And today, everybody's talking about mobile and social and what does this mean for the world, both in your sort of everyday life, but also in the workplace. But in each of those phases, in each of those big shifts in technology, actually learning has only sort of evolved. We haven't taken huge leaps forward in education, whether that's in the school or in the workplace. But what we have done at each of these steps, we've gained a little bit of an understanding about how the technology can be used in education, and we're building on that every step of the way as we go along. So back in the beginning, when we had green text on a black screen, for the first time we had a device that would actually be able to, you could interact with, and when you were asked questions and you responded, you could get different responses. And they could be personalized, but certainly you would get corrective and immediate feedback. So that was the first real time that we could interact with content on a one-to-one basis. That was a big shift. The next phase was, well, let's take that rather unexciting green text on a black screen and we'll add all this multimedia, and you know what? That interactivity suddenly becomes very engaging. And surely that's better for learning. And it was better for learning. But there still wasn't a huge shift. And then all of a sudden, 99, 2000, as Donald was talking about, we can all go online. But it was 28.8. And I have, in a longer presentation, I have the horrible sound of the screeching modem when it came on. He said, great, I'm connected. But then you had to wait for another 5 minutes for the graphic to download. So actually we went backwards in terms of the experience because we were back nearly to text on screen, maybe with some small graphics. So all the video suddenly disappeared. Those of you who were involved in the industry will remember. The CD-ROMs were thrown in the bin and everything had to go back to text on screen. But now today, what we have is a completely different world if you look back over those different shifts. So actually now, not just can we do it on our computers, but actually we can do it in our hands. And with broadband, we're back to having that rich multimedia experience, but it's still got the interactivity in it. So what we've been able to do as we go through all these shifts is to actually learn a hell of a lot more about learning and learning innovation and how we can use technology. And the great thing, and Donald has sort of touched on this, but the great thing about it from an Irish point of view is there have been companies active in this space throughout each of those phases of those evolutions of learning innovation. So I want to just do a little trial here, and this is a little bit risky because I didn't check the sort of the attendees, okay? But I want those of you who have been involved in the industry in any shape or form and have worked for, in some capacity, any one of these companies here, starting back in the 1980s, just to raise your hands. If you're still working there, you can still raise them now, okay? So I just want to show of hands. What I was hoping here is that on every table, come on you guys, what are you doing? These ones I know, right? So on most of the tables, okay, we have people putting their hands up who have worked in this relatively small handful of companies. And I think if you even extend that globally, what you will find is that there's a massive number of people who have engaged with whatever it was called, CBT, multimedia training, e-learning, or whatever we want to call ourselves today. People know about Ireland as this centre of excellence in learning technology and learning innovation. But we actually need to get much better at presenting that ourselves, right? People are scared to put their hands up as being part of this wonderful group of people, right? We need to build this centre as something that is a global centre of excellence, not about the people who are sitting in this room. And what we're hoping that by this time next year, we may not be in the stadium, but we'll be certainly in one of the larger rooms here with a much, much bigger group of people who've come from all over the world to find out what we're doing here in Dublin. So what is the next practice? Okay, and this is the question that we've been asking ourselves throughout this 5 or 6 year gestation period, let's say, for the centre. Okay, and to be perfectly honest, there is a huge array of different technologies that we can throw into the mix. Okay, and most of you, will be familiar with these ideas now. Every conference we go to, people are talking about, everybody's going to use social to learn from their colleagues, to communicate, to collaborate, to add really rich context to the content. Everybody's either going to use some kind of a game, or actually this new buzzword of gamification, is just adding game-like mechanics into training. So that I've got levels, I'm getting badges, I'm moving up the ladder, let's say, in my experience. And then we have things like 3D and virtual reality, which are still being talked about, but are maybe not quite there yet, but from a centre's point of view, are really exciting, immersive opportunities. And you can see some stuff outside, for example, the Clarity stand out there. You can see some really interesting technologies that are looking at immersive learning. Donald talked about this one here, global. Huge challenges for us as an industry in Ireland if we want to be able to not just send our content or our experience out to different devices, but in different languages and with different cultural issues to address. So there's a huge amount of issues around culture and localization. And as Vinny mentioned, one of our other centres is a centre of next generation localization. And as we know, Ireland has been a centre for localization, again, over the last 20 or 30 years. So huge challenges, but I think people are here who can help us to solve those challenges. Then, as we know, everything is going mobile. And again, I remember back even in the 90s, Apple came out with the Newton, and there was new devices being heralded all the time, but to be honest, none of them worked until, 4 years, maybe 5, the iPhone, certainly 4 since the broadband versions came out. So now what we have is across all these devices, huge, what's the word, I won't say battle coming, but huge activity in the market around the different operating systems, right? And we can see great technology from Apple, but obviously recently from Google with Android, and also just this week from Microsoft. So as a centre, we're very much agnostic of the tool, but we want to know how can the content, how can your experience use whatever mobile device the person has. So huge challenges for us as an industry. And then this idea of open source, and everyone knows it's not free, but how do I compete if somebody else is providing content that is supposedly free? And Donald was being sort of deliberately provocative, but you have got to add different value add around whatever you offer as a business if somebody else is offering that material for free. So huge challenges, but great opportunities, and we can all get excited about these. But we've kind of been here before, okay? Everybody's probably familiar with the Gartner hype cycle here, the idea of when a new technology is introduced, it's all hyped up, and everybody gets very, very excited about it. And then all of a sudden it doesn't quite deliver, and it literally drops into this trough. And it takes a long time to kind of build up the comfort in the marketplace that actually your technology, your new offering is actually of real value and delivers productivity. And to be honest, and I think Donald would agree with us here, over the last 15, 20 years, every conference that Donald has ever run, we were hyping this, then this, then this, right, as the next big thing in learning. And, oh, you know what, this didn't quite work because it wasn't engaging enough, but it's okay, now we've got videos and we've got all this sexy stuff, it'll be fine, right? And then, well, okay, it didn't quite work because we couldn't deliver it without sending out CD-ROMs, and if we changed it, we had to, oh, but now look, everything's online. But it was narrow bandwidth. So there's never been a full solution to this, but we have been guilty of overhyping it as an industry. And what the centre is going to try to do is, rather than overhyping the things that we saw on the last slide, is to take much more of a lean and agile approach and to test things as we go along, right? So that we don't overhype them, that we have a look at those technologies and we work with the research teams to put a learning context around them in a small demonstrator, and that we test that in the real world, whether that's in school, in a university, or in the workplace. And that testing is part of our research. And we learn from that, and then we go and we do it again, and we iterate again and again and again. So that we hope to be able to smooth the growth line, rather than saying it's all about mobile or it's all about social. Because we know that one technology doesn't transform learning. So that's our first kind of key pillar for predicting what next practice is to learn from our experiences in the past. Okay? The next one is to say, you know what? We're going to be brave here. We're going to put some markers down and we're going to say what we think next practice might be, or at least we're going to give some broad areas. But we're going to be very open to change, right? So we're not going to say it must be X or it must be Y. But we came up with, and actually, I think the first times we would have met would have been probably, we were talking about it 5 years ago. I think about 4 years ago, we got together as a group, all the companies nominated 1 or 2 representatives. And we spent about 3 months going through a whole process of brainstorming what we thought the issues that we shared within the industry. And remember, we have people from the K-12 or the school educational software sector, higher education, and corporate learning. And we all sat together over that period and worked out what are the things that the main themes of research that we think the industry needs to think about, and we want to find partners to work with. And those 4 themes, as Grode mentioned earlier, were social and informal learning, and within that, the area of search. How do I find the information I'm looking for? How do I make sure that all these different systems interoperate and I'm not having to work through different environments? How do I actually use the social technologies to learn, right? So really the process of learning using social technologies, and how can we make that as personalized as possible, all under the area of social and informal learning. Then this one was called mobile learning at the beginning, but we said the problem with that is, again, those of us in the industry, M-learning was around 15 years ago. But it never really worked. So let's not call it just mobile learning, because people think we tried that and it didn't work. And the key thing here is really when you add the collaboration piece and when you add the mobile piece together, what really happens then is pretty transformational, because it's much, much easier to think of something that might be useful for your colleagues. And I think that phone call earlier was somebody remembering something. And they said, Emmett's just doing it now. He's sending a text to somebody saying, I've just learned something new here, right? You wouldn't have done that if you had to go back to your desk and get your computer out and say, oh, I remember something that I heard at the session today, right? So all of a sudden, having the device that you can collaborate with transforms the way you can share and learn, okay? But what about, what device do I have in my hands right now? Is it able to display video? Is it not? Particularly in emerging markets. You know, the capabilities of different devices, huge variations. But maybe I'll be back at a computer which has got a broadband connection, you know, literally in emerging markets in a few days. So I'm going to go through some content, but I'm going to flag the fact that when I get to the learning centre in my village, when I walk 2 hours on Thursday, I'll be able to access the video that's being provided on that machine in the centre. Where am I? If I've got 1 million parts in a power station, which parts am I looking at right now? Again, really interesting conversations with Intel. If you've ever been down the fab plant, obviously a huge facility. What documents do I need right now? Where am I in the facility? What am I looking at? That kind of thing, location-based learning. And hands-on learning, again, looking at clarity out there, using sensors. What am I doing? I wave my hands around a lot. What am I actually learning? Or what are you learning while I'm waving my hands around maybe? But what do I do when I'm trying to carry out a task? Can the device learn something about what I'm doing? Am I doing it correctly? A surgeon, for example, training to do something. Can I actually get feedback? Am I doing things correctly based on the sensor that's in my hands? That's what we mean by hands-on learning. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. So immersive learning. And again, this does go right into the sort of the depth of the area of virtual worlds and games, but it also includes things like agents. So we were gonna take this one off. This one was on our agenda 5 years ago. We were about to take this off when Apple launched Siri. Okay, so now Android have a equivalent. I'm sure Kevin can tell us Microsoft have something very, very similar now on their platforms. So this whole area of agents that you can actually talk to on the device, really, really interesting to see. I don't know yet how that can. I'm a bit scared by that still, but maybe there's something in that we should look at in the center and find out what the application is for learning. And then the final one, which again, particularly in the industry, we all said, look, this is all great, but it comes back to the, let's not overhype this. What does it actually mean for the employer organization, for the school leaders, or for the government in terms of metrics? Are we actually improving learning? And what we've said from the very, very beginning is there's two things. One is, can we measure the changes that we're introducing? Again, being as agile as one can and lean about it, can we put in measures? And in the projects that Vinny will tell you about, from the very beginning, we've put in measures into the systems as they're being tested. So as we incrementally add, we'll be able to see, did people find things quicker? Did people feel that they were being offered better results? And that'll be a way for us to measure the effectiveness as we add to and improve our experience. But also, how can we assess skills in different ways? So how can we use all these technologies to assess people, whether it's in the classroom or the workplace, to find out, are they actually better equipped to carry out what is their goal or their task? So this is where we said we're going to lay down a marker and we're going to say what we think is important to the industry. And this is a pretty significant challenge to present to the research community. So our third pillar is we need to find people that we can work with. We need to find some really smart people because there's way, way too much on that last slide for the industry to take on ourselves. So because of the investment that the government has made in research in the institutions across the island in the last 6, 7 years, maybe even close to 10 years, it's a bit like the young Europeans that Donald talked about earlier. That investment has already happened. And what we've said is we need to sit on top of that investment as a learning innovations, as a Centre for Innovation and Learning Innovation. We only confirmed the name in the last week, so after 5 years of saying different things, I'm only getting there. So within the Centre for Learning Innovation in the middle, we want to sit on top of that core research and see, can we leverage the great technologies that they have in Galway around the semantic web and Web 3.0? Can we work with Trinity's adaptive personalized e-learning technologies and next generation localization? With the recommendation systems, search and sensors in Clarity and UCD, and with the mobile communications and software technologies in Waterford. So can we leverage the investment that's already gone into these centres and is continuing to go in based on the commitment from the government and build a technology centre for learning innovation that will actually build learning applications of those technologies? And Vinny will talk to you a little bit more about the specifics behind those projects. So today, what I really want to do is to just mention to everybody the huge effort that the collaborative group has put in to get us where we are today. And we wouldn't have even started this initiative if it wasn't for both Enterprise Ireland and the IDA, and particularly Garode and his team in Enterprise Ireland, because they, not only are they providing the funding, but to be perfectly honest, you know, they're the ones who actually dragged us here from the very beginning, made us work together as sometimes competitors, and brought us together over 10 years ago as a grouping, and continually kept moving us forward and saying, you guys need to collaborate if you really want to make a difference. The second group is the industry partners, who again, huge inputs from all the partners going back over that period to come up with the research agenda, and particularly as you learn about, to actually design the projects, those research demonstrators, to actually design the use cases, present the challenges which the centre is then going to address. And particularly then our research partners again, who really, it's the combination of these three groups that is what's required to make this happen. And that's pretty unique. When we go around the world, people say most of the times this doesn't happen over here. You know, companies don't tend to collaborate. This happens all right, but bringing them together, industry and academia, you know, doesn't often work. So we know that's a challenge, but we've got experience of doing it in the past, and I think we've got a really good way of working going forward. But the third piece that's actually pretty unique globally is that what we're putting together is a centre that is not just about corporate learning or about learning in the schools. It's actually about school, higher, and corporate learning. And one of the things we want to try and make sure is that folks who are involved in the schools education will actually learn from next practice in the workplace and vice versa. And again, it's a challenge, but I think we've already seen examples of how that works. And then finally, we've got an existing consortium already, and we are already surrounded by some really good people. But when you look at Ireland, it's not just about the e-learning cluster. And one of the key goals for us, and I could have all of the 50 or 60 indigenous Irish companies around here as well, but actually when we're going outside and presenting to the world, we want to say, if we're looking at mobile, if we're looking at social, if we're looking at cloud, and we think about how those apply to learning, guess what we have surrounding us here in Ireland, okay? And when we actually look at our physical locations, so we zoom in even further into Dublin, this is the location where need to change that, Centre for Learning Innovation will be based. So it's right in the heart of what people are now calling Silicon Dock, down by Grand Canal Quay. And this is just an illustration of some of the companies either already in our grouping or people who we'd like to work with who are literally within a square mile of the centre. And obviously if you expand that out, you've got, again, the next band of organisations literally focused and centred around this centre in the heart of Dublin. And this is, when people internationally see this, they really are blown away by it. Are you sure this is for real? Like that you've actually got all those companies based on your island, first of all, and then you've got them even closer and tighter. That just doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Even in Silicon Valley, it's all in a particular, it's really only in the technology industry. It's not really around, for us, certainly for learning. So we've got a cluster here that really, it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. And that's the thing we have to get really, really good at presenting internationally. And it'll be a key goal for the centre to grow ourselves both with organisations like many of you in the room, Irish companies joining the centre, bringing your areas of expertise, but also bringing your challenges to the centre. But it's critical importance for us to be able to bring in these international and multinational companies into the network as well. So that's my talk. The three things that we have in the past learned from our experiences, and based on that, we think we have a chance of being brave enough to predict what might happen, but being very, very open to change and to work with our collaborators across industry and academia, because things do change. And we learned in previous projects where we started with a word called collaboration in 2006, and by 2009, obviously the word collaboration had been replaced by social. In 2006, the word social wasn't even one that we were using. So we know that in 2 or 3 year periods, something fundamental is going to change that we haven't even thought of yet. So although we've got our research agenda, we're very, very open to change. We're really interested in having other people join us. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, because the only way we're going to achieve this is by working together and collaborating. Thank you.